Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about the Flesh Terrors. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day, and if you have any suggestions, please comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Flesh Terrors chapter. The Flesh Terrors is the smallest second founding successor chapter of the Blood Angels, numbering only 4 full companies of Astartes. They are known for their bloodthirsty nature in battle, bad temper, and fear for flaws like the Black Rage and the Red Thirst that they carry within their gene seed. The Flesh Terrors have a two-tone color scheme with crimson red covering the torso, arms, and legs of their power armor, while the helmet, shoulder, and backpack are a jet black. Like their predecessors, the Blood Angels, the Flesh Terrors adhere to a strict heraldry system, allowing them to recognize what company and squad any given battle belongs to at a glance. The advantage of such swift recognition amid the madness of battle are obvious. More than this, however, the sons of Sanguinius revere their heraldry and bear these markings as badges of pride. The Flesh Terrors chapter badge is a circular white saw blade with a crimson blood droplet at its center. The blade is centered on a field of black. Like the Blood Angels, the Flesh Terrors use variations of the blood droplet to denote company, even though their companies are often divided into ad hoc battle groups. The Flesh Terrors chapter was created in the 31st millennium after the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Guilliman, who led the reformation sweeping the Imperium after the Horus Heresy, determining that all existing Space Marine legions would be broken up into 1,000-man chapters so that no single military commander could ever again wield the dangerous power of an entire Astarte legion. This event is known as the Second Founding, and the Flesh Terrors were one of the chapters formed from the Blood Angels Legion, even as they continued to grieve for their fallen Primarch, Sanguinius, who had been slain by Horus at the climax of the Battle of Terra. When the Flesh Terrors chapter was brought into being during the Second Founding, Captain Nasir Amit, the commander of the Blood Angel Legion's 5th Company, was chosen to be its first chapter master. Of all the Legion's captains, Amit's reputation and that of his company was the most bloodthirsty. More than once the 5th Company had been called to censure by Sanguinius for their zeal in pursuing enemy forces. It was not for nothing that the outspoken officer had earned the nickname the Flesh Terror, and rather than deny the epithet, he made it his own. Amit had a predatory way about him, a sense of aggression barely held in check, that was often unleashed in full many times on the field of battle throughout the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. Like their commander, the Battle Brothers of the 5th Company were known to bear bolters and flailing knives in battle. After their official formation, the Flesh Terrors immediately left Terra to embark upon a new Imperial crusade to eliminate the traitor forces still loyal to Horus, as well as continue to purge chaotic infestations from Imperial worlds during the period known as the Great Scouring. The Flesh Terrors were assigned the battle barge Victus from their former legion, which served as their mobile fortress monastery for the next 3,000 standard years. The Flesh Terrors' reputation for savagery in battle was soon well known, and so the terrible flaws of the 9th Legion's genetic legacy must have asserted themselves very soon after the death of the Blood Angels Primarch Sanguinius. During this time, these Space Marines remained constantly on crusade, destroying any heretics whose paths they crossed. Those they encountered, they defeated. Those they defeated, they utterly annihilated, leaving no stone left unturned and no living being left to continue any heresy. Some rumors circulated of their brutality, even going so far as reaching the High Lords of Terra. However, their degree of success in achieving compliancy were nearly unparalleled. During this period of strife, as the Imperium recovered from Horus's treachery, results were valued far more than technique. As such, there were no investigations into the savage rumors that accompanied the Flesh Terrors' implacable advance. Over time, the Flesh Terrors continued to earn a reputation for savagery. These volatile Space Marines reveled in each assault action and continued to cause unacceptable levels of collateral damage. Some reports indicated that during their mad frenzies, Flesh Terrors continued their battle actions against allied forces or even against the innocent who they were sent to protect. Their reputation for such savagery had spread through millennia, to the extent that some forces, including a few Space Marine chapters, are no longer willing to engage in allied missions with members of the Flesh Terrors. In spite of this fact, there are a number of instances where the Flesh Terrors have worked in battle zones with other chapters. On a number of occasions, these include other chapters that were known to be part of the Blood Angels lineage. The Flesh Terrors fall prey to the curse of the Black Rage far more often than members of any other chapter descended from Sanguinius's lineage. This is believed to be due to a mutation in their gene seed, but their combat doctrines and military philosophy may also influence the frequency of this tragic psychogenetic syndrome. At the time of their formation, the Flesh Terrors chapter discontinued the Blood Angels' practice of assimilating blood transfusions during the neophyte's initiation, using the artifact known as the Red Grail. Some Imperial savants speculate that this practice could have contributed to the horrific mutation. When Flesh Terror Battle Brothers show the characteristic signs that they are falling prey to the tragic flaw, they are inducted into the Death Company and isolated from their healthier brethren. These Space Marines continue their service under the supervision of a High Chaplain of the Death Company, residing in their Fortress Monastery's isolated Tower of the Lost, when not called to battle. For over 20 centuries after their founding, the Flesh Terrors were a mobile, crusading chapter. Eventually, however, the chapter chose to establish a permanent fortress monastery upon a brutal death world located deep in the galaxy's west. They call it Cretacia, from the ancient Bala Sanskrit meaning birth of wrath. Cretacia was home to a small population of feral humans whose genes were pure, and who had developed a remarkable Neolithic warrior culture and produced strong and able Flesh Terror recruits. The chapter had great need of this easy supply of recruits, for as the centuries passed, the flaw in the Flesh Terror's gene seed gradually worsened, and few Flesh Terror Space Marines were able to avoid succumbing to the Black Rage after more than 200 standard years. By the end of the 41st millennium, the Flesh Terrors were able to deploy only 4 full combat-ready companies, and the degradation of their gene seed seemed to be only increasing, making it likely that unless a remedy can be found, the chapter will ultimately cease to exist. The high incidence of the Black Rage in the chapter has led the Inquisition to question the purity of the Flesh Terrors on multiple occasions, and many other Space Marine chapters refuse to fight alongside the Flesh Terrors because of their reputation for uncontrolled savagery and genetic corruption, as well as the fear that their bloodlust might be infectious. Since the terrible Cauldron Massacre of the late 36th millennium, the chapter has essentially remained under the watchful eye of the Ordo Hereticus. In the year 998 of the 41st millennium, news reached Baal that the Krypton Shield, the shield world of the Kryptis system, which stood as the bastion of the Imperium, was endangered by a large tendril of High Fleet Leviathan reaching out toward the system, and soon every planet of Kryptis felt the talon of the Great Devourer. Knowing that the consumption of the Kryptis system would open the floodgates for an unstoppable Tyranid invasion of Baal, Lord Commander Dante took action. The Flesh Terrors were the first of the Blood Angel successor chapters to heed Dante's call, and quickly joined their parent chapter in the defense of Baal and the surrounding sector. Part of a grand alliance of the Blood Angel successor chapter, they had taken their place in a thin crimson line standing against the Tyranids. The chapter sought redemption for its many past misdeeds, and the chapter master, Gabriel Seth, hoped that they might yet bring honor to their dying chapter, tempering their red thirst in the blood of their enemies. Many chapters have become wary of the Flesh Terrors, with their dire reputation for unrestrained carnage and their excess of violence. However, to Dante the Flesh Terrors were still his brothers, born of the blood of Sanguinius, and worthy allies in a war against the Hive Mind. The fact that Seth led the Flesh Terrors to the Cryptis system in such great strength speaks volume about the bond between his chapter and the Blood Angels. There are scarcely 400 Flesh Terrors left, and at the time of the Krypton War, more than half of the chapter's numbers, some 5 under-strength companies, were deployed in the war zones of Armageddon. Even so, Seth mustered much of what remained for the defense of Bao and its nearby sectors, clinging to the belief that only through blood of their foes and the manner of their death could their chapter be redeemed. However, this righteous intention would be set against the Flesh Terror's own dark nature, as they suffer the flaws of these gene seeds even more than the Blood Angels themselves. Foremost of these flaws is the Red Thirst, a bloodlust that takes the Flesh Terror's battle brothers in the heat of battle and makes them mindless killers. It is this flaw that has given them a dire reputation for carnage, and one that continues to define them. Many worlds have lived to regret the coming of the chapter, for reckless destruction and rivers of blood and madness they have spilled in the throes of their battle madness has sometimes been worse than the predation of their foe. The Flesh Terrors would prove their reputation for ferociousness many times over on the battlefield of Lysios, the Space Marines venting their fury upon the Tyranids in a maelstrom of blood. Supported by the chapter's finest war machines, there would be a horrific war of annihilation upon which they would seek to quench their red thirst. At the head of a mighty strike force that comprised the 1st and 2nd companies of the Blood Angels, Brother Corbulo, Captain Carlian, Chief Librarian Mephiston, and the bulk of Gabriel Set's Flesh Terrors, Dante struck out for the Cryptis system. The gene seed of the Flesh Terrors bears all the hallmarks of the successor chapter of the Blood Angels. Its best known characteristic is the psychic imprint of Sanguinius's memories, which leads to the affliction known as the Black Rage. This can cause them to go insane and enter a berserker rage prior to or during battle, as they feel the anger that Sanguinius himself felt during the Battle of Terra. The condition is largely irreversible and incurable. The Flesh Terrors are known to fall prey to the curse of the Black Rage far more often than any member of the other chapters descended from Sanguinius's lineage. This is believed to be due to a mutation in their gene seed, but their combat doctrines and military philosophy may also influence the frequency of this tragic psychogenetic syndrome. At the time of their formation, the Flesh Terrors chapter discontinued the Blood Angels practice known as insanguination, which involves the drinking of a small sample of Sanguinius's own blood in an artifact known as the Red Grail, to activate the implanted gene seed within their aspirants. Some might speculate that this practice could have contributed to the horrific mutation and degeneration of their gene seed. Unlike the Blood Angels and their successor chapters, the Flesh Terrors are far further along in the descent during madness. Unlike the Blood Angels and their other successors, the Flesh Terrors are far further along in the descent into madness, and their gene seed carries a heightened version of the flaw which may well spell their complete annihilation within the space of a few short decades. This means that even the most mentally stable and strong-willed of the Flesh Terrors feels the touch of the Black Rage and the pull of the Red Thirst, knowing full well that it is only a matter of time before they succumb and the madness takes them completely. A Flesh Terror battle brother knows that as soon as they become an initiate of the chapter, it is not a question of if, but when, and how long they have until they completely lose their ability to tell friend from foe. The chapter's apothecaries believe that their gene seed also grants its recipients a significant extended life expectancy, in keeping with its lineage. However, this point is largely moot. The life expectancy for most new initiates to the chapter is less than 2 standard centuries. While a few of these inductees may die from war, the vast majority fall prey to the Black Rage. For unknown reasons, the Flesh Terrors succumb to the Black Rage far more than other successor chapters, and therefore these Astartes are dwindling in number. Numerous efforts have been taken to attempt to mitigate the sudden and severe onset of the Black Rage among the chapter's battle brothers. The adoption of nightly bloodlettings and purification rituals have not been shown to assist battle brothers in their efforts to resist the Black Rage, nor has it mitigated the syndrome's effects once a Space Marine has entered the latter stages of the curse. The only treatment for those who fully succumb is reassignment to the Death Company and isolation within the chapter's Tower of the Lost. A fortune few find solace in death when they continue to serve their chapter on the battlefield as members of the Death Company. Less fortunate battle brothers are subject to permanent incarceration once the High Chaplain of the Death Company has lost the ability to control them. The combination of a rapid decline due to the Black Rage and their proclivity for brutal assaults have increased the chapter's rate of decline. This is why the chapter currently only has enough Space Marines in its rank to deploy 4 full battle companies. In many instances, flesh terrors have died before their progenoid gland can be properly harvested. This combination has cut into the chapter's available supply of gene seed, as well as limiting the number of veteran Space Marines capable of training new inductees. For this reason, the number of members assigned to apothecary training has recently increased, as has the prioritization of recovering these precious glands from fallen battle brothers. The cumulative effects may be that the Flesh Terrors could become a non-substantial chapter within a relatively short time, unless some sort of extreme measure is considered. The Flesh Terrors also suffer from the Red Thirst, an overwhelming desire to physically taste their enemy's blood. Unfortunately, when this trait is combined with the Black Rage, it can devolve into outright cannibalistic assaults by the enraged Space Marines. The cursed Astartes of the Flesh Terrors seem doomed to watch the ongoing collapse of their beloved chapter. Even as they revel in the destruction of the Emperor's foes, they must also watch as their comrades give in to the curse of Sanguinius's gene seed. In spite of this, they remain valiant servants of the Imperium, rather than giving in to the woe and despair. They constantly strive to fight against the curse as bravely as they can fight those who oppose mankind. As true tragic heroes, the Flesh Terrors remain devoted to their cause, even in the face of ultimate defeat. As the Black Rage continues to consume its membership, the leaders of the Flesh Terrors have come to the inescapable conclusion that their beloved chapter may be doomed to eventual disintegration. They continue to seek a cure for this curse, but some consider their eventual depletion inescapable. Some among the leadership have begun to embrace the notion that if they cannot continue, then their best approach is to make certain that they leave a bold legacy, in keeping with the chapter's proud traditions. Most vital to these traditions is the way that they embrace savagery in combat. This is likely a combination of their susceptibility toward the Black Rage, as well as the Blood Angels' tradition of excellence in assault actions. Even with their acquisition of Cretaceous as a homeworld, the Flesh Terrors proudly exhibit their preference for the native survival in the face of the planet's massive creatures requires an ability to overcome even the most extreme odds through constant warfare. Of course, the Flesh Terrors are tremendously unlikely to compromise with regard to their savagery. The Flesh Terrors have a long tradition of attempting to honor these memories by fulfilling the Primarch's and the Emperor's wishes for a galaxy under complete Imperial compliance. In many instances, the only way the chapter has a reasonable chance to achieve victory is by taking the most extreme of actions against their opponents. There are very few known instances where Flesh Terror commanders ever hesitate to unleash weapons of cataclysmic proportions. With each battle won, the Battle Brothers of the Flesh Terrors feel confident that their Primarch's legend has been preserved. This serves as the most effective method of preserving his glory, as well as that of the 9th Legion he once led. In many cases, the worlds targeted by the chapter have strayed in some significant way from the Imperium. It is these conflicts that offer the greatest temptation for flesh terrors to fully engage their thirst for savagery. Those who show any taint of heresy, or who even choose to ally themselves, however briefly, with heretics, are targeted for purging. In some instances, purges have continued well beyond a reasonable level. As battle brothers of the chapter continue their acts of savage brutality long after a justifiable conflict has been completed. For many Flesh Terror Space Marines, such frenzied battles represent a very real warning of the doom that encroaches upon their minds. With each period of savagery, their chance to return to a more stable state of consciousness can become increasingly difficult. This represents a very real sign to these battle brothers that their final emotional and mental collapse approaches them. Like their fellow Astartes chapters, the Flesh Terrors also maintain a librarium of potent psychers who are highly talented and trained to master the powers of the warp at the highest levels. Each chapter selects its librarians in its own way, either from seed worlds, as it does with the bulk of its initiates, or from the ranks of gifted psychers brought to the Scholastica Psychanum of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Most chapters train and test chosen psychers following the ancient ways laid out in the Codex Astartes. Librarians of the Flesh Terrors are trained in this way, and with few minor variances, have been taught to live by the word of the Codex. Flesh Terrors librarians have a number of unique psychic abilities only used by the psychers of their chapter. One of these is the Depths of Rage. This is when the librarians of the Flesh Terrors chapter are well versed in the use of psychic powers while struggling with the Black Rage and Red Thirst. Many have even developed powers which tap into the rage deep within them and use it to further fuel their powers or enhance their abilities. Another unique psychic ability is the flensing. The Flesh Terrors often live up to their name when engaged in combat, skinning their foes with well-precise blows from their blades and chain weapons. Librarians of the chapter are no exception, and the flensing power has been developed with such hideous injuries in mind, allowing them to more effectively earn such grisly trophies. Lastly, a Flesh Terror librarian can use the psychic power called Razor Blades. When a Flesh Terror librarian, like the other battle brothers of their chapter, understand and appreciate the virtues of a good sharp blade, by focusing their psychic power, the librarian can make an edge keener and steel sharper, so that it might more easily bite into the flesh and bone. And those were 40 facts on the Flesh Terrors chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now this is post Primaris, after the Primaris and the basically revamp of the entire Blood Angels lines. Well, all the successor chapters got recruits. It did change. We will create a 40 facts video specifically on that in the future. Probably couple that with more talk on the demon that actually speaks to them. But that's coming in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.